you at, Chuck?
I am in Scottsdale, Arizona.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay, then.
Have you played here before?
Yeah. I can't remember when, but yeah.
Is there any city, like any big city that you haven't played in? You probably played everywhere, right?
Probably.
Where are you now? Are you in Colorado? Is that because that's where you're
Yeah,
from?
I'm in Westminster, Colorado, which is halfway between Denver and Boulder.
Oh, okay. I'm trying to remember. I think we're going to go to Colorado. We're going to go to Fort Collins. That's like north of Denver.
Right. Yeah, it's north of Denver, and Fort Collins is a nice place.
Any recommendations?
They have a lot of good restaurants. No, not really. I don't get up there that much.
What do you like to do when you go to cities? Do you go to certain restaurants or things like, what about just in Colorado in general? Is there favorite restaurants, parks, things to do, things to see?
Well, let me go back to the early part of that question. I used to, when I'd go on the road, make sure I went and hit art museums in New York City or in LA or, someplace. But mostly now we don't have a lot of time. And with the airlines being as weird as they are, we have to go in a day early. So we definitely have restaurants that are favorites of ours in St. Louis or in 4 or 5 different cities. Hey, let's get in early. Salt Lake City's got a great Mexican food restaurant about a mile from the airport. So yeah, I've been on the road for most of my adult life, and that's why I've stayed in Colorado. Colorado's beautiful, and I get to travel all over.
Is it hard being on the road the older you get, though? Because I would think like it's a lot different traveling in your 20s. Like, I hear musicians tell stories about sharing a bus with like a bunch of people in their 20s, and it's kind of fun. But then as you get older, it's like, it's not as fun anymore.
Not as fun anymore. And yeah, touring now sucks. And, airports and, and airlines with, sometimes 50 canceled flights a day, and all that kind of stuff. It sucks. And Firefall, like almost every other group that is in our ballpark or bigger in stature, we pretty much had to take a year and a half off during the pandemic. 2019 and 2020, everybody's like, no, we're not going to live shows.
Yeah. So then you do, now I heard what's more economical than traveling in a bus is to do these fly-in dates. And my question was always like, well, how do you bring the drums? But I guess a lot of these places now they have a drum set or kit that's just set up. So you can fly in, bring a guitar and a couple, things that you need.
Most places we play, hire a backline company to bring in guitar amps, drums, bass amp, keyboards. Yeah, and I fly with my guitar on my shoulder, and we just go. And and I have a preference of my 1, 2, 3 choices for amps. And as a lead guitar player, I'm one of the fortunate ones that has bone tone going, and you really get your tone from your fingers and your hands. And it doesn't really matter what amp you play through or what guitar you play through. You still kind of sound like yourself. But I get a rental amp every night, and within about 15 seconds with my one pedal and my echo pedal, I'm a kind of a minimalist on pedals. Woo, okay, there I go. I'm done.
I've never heard that term. I like that, bone tone. I have to remember that one.
Oh, really? Yeah. I mean, it's an old term. It's an old term that a lot of guitar players have used over the decades. And it's true. If you put Stevie Ray Vaughan on a Gibson or, a cheap Japanese guitar, he'd still sound like Stevie Ray Vaughan.
No, I remember that because I dabbled with music. I took guitar lessons for a couple of years and I sucked. And I always thought like, oh, maybe my guitar is bad. And then my guitar teacher would pick it up and he'd just shred all this stuff. And I was like, okay, maybe it's me. Maybe I'm not very good.
Right. Well, speaking of guitar teachers, one of the best things that ever happened to me was when my family moved from the rural Kansas to the Colorado Springs area in Colorado, where we had vacationed for a number of years before that. I showed an interesting guitar, and I wanted to get out of the series. This is like 1957 or 58. Okay. I wanted a red guitar out of the Sears catalog that was $59 that may have even had a little amplifier in the case, one of those pieces of crap. And my mom was a musician and knew that that wasn't probably a very good instrument. And she happened to hear that a world famous jazz guitar player named Johnny Smith from the 40s and 50s moved to Colorado Springs and opened a music store and a teaching deal. And, Johnny Smith had played with Stan Getz and Doc Severinsen and who's bigger, Bing Crosby, great guy. And he was he ended up being a Gibson and guitar endorsee. And I went and tried out, and he said, I don't usually take kids this young, 8.5 years old, to my mom, but I was one of his first guitar students. And my first guitar was a Gibson 3/4 size student model that he got. And I got to take lessons from the maestro who was my main mentor in my early life until I was 14. And basically after February 1964, when the Beatles played on Ed Sullivan, I went, I don't want to learn jazz anymore. I want to do that. And the cool thing about that, in 64, I'd already played for about 4 or 5 years. And all of my friends in high school, I think I was a freshman or in 8th grade or something, said, God, I think I want to play guitar and be in a band. And I already had a leg up on them. But I was taught by a guy who really knew his stuff. And I think one of the main things I learned from Johnny Smith, other than melodic playing and you're having conversations with your audience when you play solos, was that being a tasteful soloist and playing tastefully isn't what you play, it's really what you don't play. And the spaces you leave between whatever it is you play speak sometimes louder than anything you could play. And it's just like, periods or exclamation points on sentences, it's like you need that, and I hated so many lead guitar players back in the 60s and 70s just showed out how fast they were and aren't I great and a big ego kind of thing. And to me, the first and most important thing a band is doing is playing the song. And then everything you do as a player, whether it's soloing or playing licks or playing rhythm, is to enhance the song and not your ego or I really want to stick this lick in there, kind of stuff. It's like you got to legitimately want to make the song better. And that's one of the things that Firefall had going from the start, Just
but what about when you do get to solo? Because I think on this new album, I heard you shredded a little bit, and I mean, it sounds like you're having some fun when you do get to do that, though, right?
Oh, absolutely. And on this album, first of all, it was a very careful and selective process about which songs do we do. What's heart song do we do? Oh my God, what Doobie Brothers song should we do? But on the solos, I'm playing solos on a song that people like Toy Caldwell from Marshall Tucker, or Lindsey Buckingham, the great Lindsey Buckingham from Fleetwood Mac, or those kick-ass 3 guitar players for Lynyrd Skynyrd, or Dan Fogelberg, all of which were great lead guitar players. I'm doing them honor by playing my solo on their song. And the only song I really copped and really copied was the Dan Fogelberg song on Part of the Plan, because, Mark Andrews used to play with Dan a lot. He was in Boulder. I knew him pretty well. Got to sit in with Dan a number of times, including once at Red Rocks. His solo on Part of the Plan is about as good as it gets. And I wanted to play it like it's supposed to be, And then on the other songs, like on Lynyrd Skynyrd on Simple Man, which is currently available on Amazon, you can listen to, even though the album's not quite out yet. On Simple Man, I only listened to the Skynyrd version a month or two before we started recording it. And, and a lot of these songs, frankly, were done with me doing 4 or 5 rhythm guitar parts to a click track and then emailing them to somebody else to put a bass on, or, hey, let's, and, but on the Lynyrd Skynyrd song, I just, wanted to burn and, and have my licks go to town and honor those guys who used to kick ass every night when they played. I've never been a speed burner. So to me, speed is used if you've got it some of the time. And now that I'm older and older and getting arthritic, I'm glad I wasn't a speed burner, because I can still solo pretty good, because it's more about melodies, playing melodies and having conversation with your listener. And in this case, I wanted to be true to Randy California on the Spirit song. In fact, that's another one. I played his solo verbatim because that's what it should be.
Well, yeah, that's probably how people expect to hear when they're listening to the song. Although you do change some things, like on the first song, "Long Train Running," Doobie Brothers song. You guys added some horns, right? I don't remember those horns in the original.
No, they weren't, and I didn't realize. The same thing. I kind of only listened to "Long Train Running" early on in the process, but what I wanted to do with that song, because frankly, I guessed that there'd be thousands of Doobie Brothers fans that were going, how dare they do that song? That's my favorite damn song. And they may be right. That's why our versions of all these songs had to be top notch and really good. The original incredibly signature guitar part by Tommy Johnson and the Doobie Brothers, that's the primary guitar part on their song. But there is another second part that plays a lot and plays throughout the song a lot. And when I heard that, I went, I'm making that my number one, because I wanted to kind of not minimalize, but I wanted to put that signature Doobie guitar lick kind of a little bit more in the background, and I didn't even realize that they had harmonica all over the darn song. And I'm really glad that we, kind of as a last minute, hey, Jim, try some sax in here, because probably half of the songs I wanted to keep right like they were supposed to be, but some more of the songs, I didn't mind going outside the boundaries of what they had done and change them up a little bit, just so long as our version ended up being really good.
Yeah, and I think you did that with the Heart song too. What About Love? Because and I know you toured with Ann Wilson and Heart, and I had Ann Wilson on the show, and I know she was not a fan of the 80s songs, but you changed it, so maybe she'll like this version better.
I don't know, but what's interesting is, first of all, I had no idea what Heart song to do. And Mark Andes had left the band, and that was the reason. Now, we used to tour a lot with Heart. We shared a manager with them. Firefall did for about 3 or 4 years. Went to Japan with Heart. Somebody said, hey, do Barracuda. And I went, no. Heart should be the only band that does Barracuda. Let's pick a song. And John, our new lead vocalist, said, I could sing the hell out of What About Love. Now, let me sidetrack a little bit and say, Steve Weinmeister, my lead guitar player, lead singer, was in the band for 25 years, quit the band, and came back. He's a great singer. When Mark Andes quit, I needed a bass player and hopefully sang good. And we found John Bisaha from the Babies. He's in the band The Babies, but they hardly ever work anymore. And he would love to be in the band and join into a band who's about to make a record of all these great songs. And, he's a phenomenal Los Angeles rock star, rock and roll singer, just singing and for me to have Steve and John sing most of this record, I'm the third singer and I sing the low parts, and I allowed myself 3 songs to sing on this 13-song album, but those are the guys. And man, they sang great. It was so amazing having John be able to sing the Ann Wilson song, you know, and we had to put it down at some keys. I'm good friends, as is John Bisaha, with original guitar player, keyboard player Howard Leese, who's been with Bad Company and Paul Rogers for the last 10 years. He's retired now too. And I asked Howard, I said, hey, Howard, we're going to do What About Love? And you played such a great solo on the original. You want to play the solo on this song of ours? And maybe some crunch, power chords in the choruses? And he said, sure. And then I sent it to him and he said, well, I like your version. It's different, but you changed the chords in the guitar solo. And he said, so I can't play my same solo that I did. And I went, I don't want you to play the same solo. You're a great player. Come up with something. And that's actually two Howards and a Jock playing unison Howard solo on that song. So there's three guitar players kind of playing the same thing. Some with too much echo and me with no echo and everything. And we made this really big sounding lead guitar solo out of Howard's really kind of thin one that he sent me. But it's really funny, some of the stories behind this. And I'm really glad to have Howard Leese on this record, or John Jorgensen, one of the best guitar players in the planet, on the Bird song, or Tristan Bowden on drums from Chicago and Kenny Loggins Band. It was great.
That's really cool. Now, who did the vocals on the World Turning, the Fleetwood Mac song? Because that one, especially, those vocals blew me away. I was like, wow, this is really good singing on here.
Yeah, John Bisaha, that's our new guy. And he's, 10, 15 years younger than all of us. And he's great. And, I wanted to keep a balance good between John singing lead, Steven singing lead, throw a couple of mine in, but John is in a whole nother, stratosphere by himself. And, that Lindsey Buckingham song, we kind of did that one at a time. And I did 4 acoustic guitar parts with a click track and a tambourine, staying really true to kind of what Lindsey Buckingham did on his original, not the solo anything, but the guitar parts. And I sent it out to John. I emailed it out to John, and he put the bass on and sent back that vocal. And it's astounding. When he first comes in, you go, whoa, who is that? It's great.
Yeah. No, that's really good. Now, didn't you guys tour with Fleetwood Mac on the Rumor?
Oh, that's why. Yeah, that's why they're on the record.
What memories do you have of that tour? Like, that sounds like that would be a lot of fun, just to hang out with Fleetwood Mac and tour the world.
Well, it's not so much hanging out with Fleetwood Mac. So our first album in 1976 came out gangbusters. And suddenly we were on the road with the Doobie Brothers and the band, Levon Helm and the boys, last tour, and Loggins and Messina, and, Leonard Skinner before the plane crash, and Fleetwood Mac during the White Album. And they really liked us as an opening act because we could go play a 35-minute set of radio-friendly songs already and not even have to get a sound check. We were kind of a military unit ready to go. You put us on stage, we'll play. And so we became their opening act of choice for the first album. And then a half a year later, when they put Rumors out, we opened a lot of shows for them, all stadium shows. The biggest show I ever played in Colorado was on CU campus on Folsom Stadium. It was Fleetwood Mac Rumors tour, 1977, May 1st, 1977. Bob Seger and the Silver Bullet Band and Firefall. And what's interesting is 2.5 years earlier, we've been playing this little club trying to get our songs together. And 2.5 years later, we're in front of almost 70,000 people in our hometown, home state, playing in front of Fleetwood Mac, who was, undoubtedly the biggest band in the world then.
Wow.
It was great.
Yeah, that's amazing stories to have that. I looked at some of the concert history again. I don't know if this is accurate because it's internet, but Did you do a show with Heart? There's a show that says you played with Heart, Blue Oyster Cult, Freewheel, and Motörhead. Is that real?
Oh, yeah. Motörhead's first gig in America. It was Miami. It was Miami, a baseball stadium. I don't know if Heart was the headliner. It might have been either the Beach Boys or Doobie Brothers, but it was Heart, UFO, Firefall, somebody else, and Motörhead opened the show. And it was their first gig in America, and it was weird as crap to be on stage going, we're going to play Just Remember I Love You now.
Right. Yeah. Cause I'm just looking at that, like those bands. I'm like, that must have been different for the crowd that was showing up for those other bands. And then Motörhead must have blown them away.
Particularly to start the show.
Yeah.
And I don't think anybody'd really heard of Motörhead yet,
Sure.
So it's like, wow, unbelievable.
Did you have a lot of shows like that where there were like some of these festivals and things? There's a lot of festivals that happen now where there's like, sometimes even put comedians in between bands. I mean,
right.
It could be weird sometimes when you line up all these different kinds of bands or different kinds of artists.
Well, there was one weird bill that we were on. We did 3 gigs in Texas. Willie Nelson, Asleep at the Wheel, and Firefall. And we're going, and we Asleep at the Wheel opened the show. We played second and Willie came on, and we'd get on stage and it would be all of Willie's folks out in the audience in the 70s. And within a few seconds, they're going, oh, a rock band,
Well,
but yeah,
aren't you guys country rock shows.
Go ahead.
Aren't you country rock? Is that what you're classified as? Or, I mean, it's kind of
misclassified as, yeah. But we're misclassified. We weren't, but that came from our history and our family tree. The trunk of the tree is the Byrds and the Buffalo Springfield, and then the branches are Poco, Eagles, Graham Parsons, and Firefalls at the top of that tree. And we have definite Byrds connections, Flying Breeder connections, a lot of those connections with Stephen Stills, all that kind of stuff. So I don't know if it was the song Cinderella, but we were really never a country rock band. We had our influences, but, and we weren't really a folk rock band with who the Byrds, invented that with their second album and the 12-string and the acoustic guitars and stuff. We kind of had our own little niche. And after a few years, people writing interviews or radio people would call us the Colorado Sound, but that only lasted in Boulder for a long time. And the truth is, there was this family tree of that folk rock, country rock thing that Firefall's really at the top layers of that tree. And then Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, that's a whole nother tree in the valley and he's playing Bird songs in a 12-string too, but it's like, it's interesting. And the intertwining nature of a lot of those bands and singers and songwriters. And when you think about how many bands Bernie Leadon was in, or Linda Ronstadt was the girlfriend of Lowell George of Little Feat, and then J.D. Souther, and and just the whole thing, is so amazing, intertwining. And to me, that's kind of what Firefall was. It was part of that mesh of all those. Rick Roberts discovered Emmylou Harris when he was in the Flying Breeder Brothers and talked Chris into coming and have him come down. Did I tell you this story already?
Wait, which one?
No. Okay. So I must have been my last interview. But then Emmylou went to Graham Parsons. Graham's first gig on the road was in Boulder, Colorado. They couldn't get James Burton, who played all over Graham's record GP, from Elvis's band, because Elvis wouldn't let James play with anybody else. And Clarence White from the Byrds, amazing player. Clarence White was in the Byrds already. So they hired a guitar player kind of sight unseen, and he didn't really work out. And their first gig was in Boulder, and I got the gig. And I went out on the road with them. You know, I got hired. I wasn't a country picker, but I was a good guitar player and played good rock and roll. So they figured, oh, he's better than the other guy. And I got hired. We played our first gig at the world famous Armadillo headquarters in Austin, Texas. But the second gig was in Liberty Hall in Houston. And on our last night of that stand for us, Graham Parsons, Emmylou Harris, and the Fallen Angels, with me in it, onto the stage walks Neil Young and Linda Ronstadt to sit in with us. And it was the first night that Emmylou and Linda ever met or sang together. And after they played 2 songs, Neil said, come on, we're going to have a party in my hotel suite. Come on back. So 3 bands. Neil Young's band, Linda Ronstadt's band, and Graham Parsons' band all goes back to Neil's hotel suite, doing maximum quantities of everything, and some of us. And Graham, as he was wont to do, grabs Neil's guitar and starts playing like 20 or 25 country songs, you know, that I'd never heard of before. And the amazing thing was, Emmylou and Linda Ronstadt sat a little bit away from him, facing each other, their faces about 6 inches apart, and blended their voices in harmony for the very first time. And Graham just kept playing country song after country song, and Emmylou and Linda just kept singing. And all of us listening and watching to that, watching that in the suite, we all knew how magical that was, but we knew it was historic too. I mean, Graham Parsons, Emmylou Harris, and Linda Ronstadt. It was like, wow, unbelievable.
Wow. That's one of those times where you wish you had a smartphone because you'd be taking video of that.
Yeah, exactly. In fact, I still kick myself for all, you know, we were on the road with the band or Lynyrd Skynyrd or Fleetwood Mac, you know, and everything. And I had all access passes. I didn't ever take a camera. I wanted to take an Instamatic. I could have taken, here's Hart, here's Fleetwood Mac, oh, there's Stevie Nicks. And I didn't take one damn picture in the 70s.
What? But did other people take pictures? You find stuff with the band members or audience members?
Yeah, but I don't, you know, I don't have any pictures, you know, of me and Mick Fleetwood back in the day, which I got to drink with him a couple of times. Or, you know, what's it
like to drink with? What's it like drinking with Mick Fleetwood? That's got to be interesting.
It was great. Are you kidding? And particularly now, you know, I think it might have been my last interviewer, which was saying, "Oh, it'd be great to hang out with Fleetwood Mac." It's like, we didn't hang out with them. We during Rumors, they had 5 different dressing rooms and 5 limos, you know, and Stevie and Lindsay had broken up and written songs about it that were huge hits now that they had to play on stage. Christine McVie and John McVie had broken up from being married, you know, and, you know, so I didn't really, and Stevie Nicks came and sat in with Firefall once at the Roxy in LA, you know, and stuff. But some of those bands we didn't get to be close friends with, you know, although the Doobie Brothers, the Michael McDonald, Skunk Baxter Doobie Brothers, after the original Tommy Johnson Doobie Brothers, much earlier, we got to be really close friends with them. And just looking back, it was so historic and amazing to have even been there, not even playing on stage. I got to sit when the band was playing. We'd play our set, and then I'd come out and sit behind the curtain in the wings about 10 feet away from Lee Von Helm and watch him sing and play. And it'd be just like, oh, you know. Yeah. And Garth Hudson on every instrument imaginable behind, you know, between them, and Robbie Robertson and Rick Danko and Richard Manuel. But sometimes on that last tour, they would have their 5-piece Civil War horn section come out and play live gigs. And I was just like, oh my God, I knew how lucky I was to be privy to all that.
Yeah. And didn't you play with Steve Winwood and Michael McDonald and did Give Me Some Lovin'? That must have been fun.
That's one of the highlights of my career. Quickly, I wrote a song for suicide prevention to be on an album here in Colorado.
Call
And they
on
sold
Me.
a little,
Great
they
song.
sold, thank you, Call on Me, great song. And they put it out in Colorado Springs, raised a little money, you know. And then I went, well, what do I do with this song? You know, and I thought, suicide's a big problem, you know, and I knew a lot of people in Nashville. So my first suicide prevention at the Little Bluebird Cafe in Nashville, Michael McDonald was my headliner, who I got to know real well with the Doobies. David Pack from Ambrosia, who I had met through Michael, and Rusty Young from Poco were three of my top stars to headline the show. And we're playing, and it's going great, and it's packed in, and I'm just honored to be the MC and kind of the guy that put this together, you know, to have all this amazing stuff happening in Nashville, of all places. So we took a break, and Michael came up to me at halftime and said, Jock, Steve Winwood's in the audience, and would you mind it if he played a few songs? And I went, would I mind it? Oh my God, get him up here. And when Steve came in and played, he came up, and Michael asked him what song he wanted to do. And he said, how about Can't Find My Way Back Home by Blind Faith, that he sang with Eric Clapton. He said, so I'll need an acoustic guitar. And I said, here, play mine. So he plays my acoustic guitar, and we're playing and singing, you know, behind Can't Find My Way Home. And it's a really small stage at the Bluebird. So yeah. I could have reached out and touched him. And then he takes off the guitar, and the crowd's freaking out and loving it. And he starts getting off stage, and Michael grabs him and says, no, give me some lovin'. I mean, give me some lovin'. That's one of the top 2 or 3 rock songs in history for me. Young Steve Winwood, 15-year-olds with Spencer Davis. Oh my God, that's great. So anyway, he sits down at Michael's piano, and he looks up at Michael and says, I'll need an organ sound. And Michael goes, sure. And he gets an organ sound, and he's sitting literally one pace in front of me. And we sing my favorite rock song, Give Me Some Lovin', with 3 of the best rock and roll singers ever, Steve Winwood, Michael McDonald. I'm sharing a mic with Michael McDonald, and David Pack, you know, and I'm thinking I could die and go to heaven now. This is like it. Yeah. I don't have to do anything else. And it was just so much fun. And it was for a real good cause. And we did another one in Nashville the next year, suicide prevention, that Winona Judd and Michael McDonald headlined for me. And you know, and I did one here in Colorado. Oh no, we did one with Journey out in San Francisco with Journey and Firefall. You know, and I got to meet the guys in Journey who I'd never met before, because they said, we'd love to help with the suicide prevention thing. So in my own small way, my song Call on Me, for about 2 years or so, was the song that all the big boys in Washington, D.C. kind of used to the Association of Suicidology, or all these different things. You know, these bureaucrats in Washington, D.C. would fly me out to these suicide conferences to sing my song. And I'm going, wow, you know. And what was amazing and terrible and tragic about that was, you meet the people that would man the hotlines. You'd meet the bigwigs and the bureaucrats from Washington, D.C. who made kept all the money. And you'd meet the families of, you know, teenagers who had committed suicide. Or I met a couple of families who 2 young people had committed suicide, and they're just like, oh my God. And that was shortly after Columbine High School in Colorado. And it's like, you know, not too many people were talking about that then.
Yeah, well, I'm glad that we can raise awareness now. Like I've definitely talked about that on my podcast many times. Is there a charity that you work with now that people could donate to if they are interested in that cause?
You know, something with suicide prevention, and pretty much any of the people that solicit money to do what they do, you know, my song helped to keep the hotlines on, you know, in a national, you know, coordinated kind of deal. Because until that time, you know, it was like this state, it was all pretty not centralized. And the U.S. Surgeon General at the time, David Satcher, wanted to get it an 800 number for anybody around the country. So, I feel really privileged and fortunate to have played a small role in that. But any charity, local or national, with suicide prevention is my guess.
Yeah, that's great. Can you stick around for a little more? Or do you have another one to get to?
I don't. I'm done for the day.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because I have some more questions.
We can keep talking.
Okay, yeah. I wanted to ask you, did you played on Andy Gibbs' solo album, Shadow Dancing? Tell me the story with that. That's did you actually get to like work with him and meet him, or was it a thing you just went in with it?
No. I met Barry twice. Well, so in Criteria Studios in Miami, it's the Hit Factory, right? It was the Bee Gees and Dave Mason and Eric Clapton, 461 Ocean Boulevard, and Crosby, Stills and Nash, and and Firefall made gold records down there, back in the 70s. Our first two albums, the engineer on the Firefall albums was a guy named Carl Richardson. And we had a producer, Jim Mason, and Carl was a whiz, and you could tell he would be a good producer. And suddenly, he was a co-producer on the Bee Gees records being made in Miami at Criteria. Albie Galutin and Carl Richardson are the producers of those albums. And we were down there making maybe our third album, Milan, with Tom Dowd, the producer Tom Dowd, amazing. And Carl passed me in the hallway one day and said, "Hey, we're making a new record on Andy Gibb. And we got a song that you might just fit on great. You want to bring your guitar by Saturday?" And I went, "Sure." And I ended up playing on two songs on the Shadow Dancing album. The only parts of mine they used on the record was on a song called Why, but they used this little harmony ascending line that I played over like eight measures or something. And they said, "That's great, thanks." Never met Andy. I did meet Barry Gibb twice down there. Boy, in Bee Gees' heyday too. And when the album was done, I realized that I made the record and they were handing out platinum records for anybody who played on the record. And what's interesting is the guy who replaced Rick Roberts when I reformed Firefall, after Rick Roberts was the final guy to quit Firefall. The way our corporation was set up is if you gave up title to the name, if you quit the band, you gave up title to the name. And when the dust settled, I went, I could keep this band going. And John Sambatero, who's now out on the road with Dave Mason, he was one of the main studio singers at Criteria on Eric Clapton's records, on Dave Mason, on some Bee Gees records, and he was singing with Andy on the Andy Gibb record. So I hadn't met Johnny yet, but here 6 months later, after we got our platinum records for Andy Gibb, we are in Firefall together.
Yeah, that's interesting. So talk about that. I'm curious about that portion of the band's career because, you had those two big hits early and then Atlantic stuck with you. And then even after Rick left, you still had 3 more albums on Atlantic. So
not
7 albums.
Quite. No, not quite. We had 3 great first albums with Rick and Larry writing all the songs. I think I got one song on one of the albums. I developed later as a songwriter. But frankly, with no specifics, we had a couple of drug addicts and alcoholics in the band. And when we'd go out and play live, some of those singers couldn't sing, and here we were a vocal band. And I remember Mark Andes and I one time looking at each other before a gig. It was Pablo Cruz Firefall somewhere. And Mark and I went, neither one of our guys can sing. What are we going to play? And that's really a shame that happened, but it was part of the Firefall karma that was, I mean, we were meant to be and fated to be in that band. And, you know, some people's extracurricular activities got in the way of their performance of the band. So when Rick Roberts quit, okay, so after our Clouds Across the Sun album, the last album with Rick, and I think that was made using Chris Bowden and George Hawkins from Kenny Loggins' band. So Michael Clark and Mark Andys had left our band, and it was an okay record, but erratic in the songs and problems. Atlantic ended up dropping Firefall after that record. And then when the dust settled and I realized if I wanted to, I could go out on the road as Firefall or start up a new album or whatever, I could be it. And when I was talking to a lawyer in Miami who had done some of the earlier Firefall stuff, he said, Johnny Sambatero and Chuck Kirkpatrick are great singer guitar players, and we could form the band down here and just, and I went down and met him. And, suddenly my band in Colorado was now mostly in Florida, and I was the only Colorado guy, but they were great singers and had some good songs. And I figured, let's go. And that attorney went to Atlantic and said, we got a whole new band. Listen to this song, which was Always, Johnny's song Always off of Break of Dawn album. And Atlantic went, great. And they signed us again. They dropped us and then they signed us.
That is amazing. I've not heard a lot of stories like that. The record business. That's very rare.
No. And that, and one of the stories that people don't know about the record business, particularly back in the 70s or in the 80s when they were signing a lot of people, is record labels signed about half of the acts that they would sign, knowing that they weren't going to push them or they would not be big. They did it for a tax write-off. Well, we gotta pay for Bruce Springsteen. We're going to need 2 or 3 acts to balance the books on. And so there were a lot of acts who thought, oh, God, we got to get a record deal with Blank Records. And, and the label would say, this album's not quite good enough. Can you do some more? Can you do some more? And then they put it on the shelf and never put it out. So Firefall was one of the lucky ones that had the songs, and Ahmet Erdogan from Atlantic Records loved us for a couple of years, so,
That's interesting. Do you think the record business is better in some ways in that regard? Because anybody can put out a record that can sound really good. I mean, you can make like studio sounding records in your basement and,
right.
But you don't need the record label to sign. You could just put it out on YouTube or Spotify yourself. I mean,
right. I don't think it's better. I think it's way more open. And, how many tens of thousands of people think, hey, I can make a rap record. I can talk. I can program a drum machine, so there was something magical, particularly in the 70s. We were lucky, because in the 70s, record labels, if they kind of liked what you sound like and they look good too, they would sign you to a 5 or 7 album deal and pretty much hands off with the kind of music you played. So you could get a Crosby, Stills and Nash or an America or a Little River Band or a Firefall or a Loggins and Messina or Kenny Loggins, they were willing to let you do what you did and they'd be the record label. And then, of course, in the early 80s, pretty much record labels started to get that stranglehold on bands and say, no, we don't hear, we think you should do these songs. And, you need to get rid of the guitar player and get somebody else. And, they had an iron fist around bands' necks, and it showed kind of in the music. And then the whole grunge thing in the 80s came where, everybody in Seattle was going, you record companies, it's like, it's all a process. But something about, okay, first of all, we musicians and songwriters and singers learned from the Beatles in the 60s that you could write your own songs and make all the money. So Rick Roberts had a hit with Colorado, his song Colorado, when Linda Ronstadt recorded it. and he knew about making money. And back then, songwriters made, when I was making 40 or 50 grand as a band guy in 1976 or 77, that was pretty good money. But, the songwriters were making, 2.3 million and, that kind of stuff. It's like Firefall was a great combination of personalities and sounds, and particularly the songs and players to play those songs, that we burned really brightly for about 3 or 4 or 5 years. And heck, I've been having my career for the last 35 years because of that first 4 years of Firefall.
That's amazing. And you guys are still touring. There's a bunch of tour dates on the website that people could check out. And this new album comes out, September 15th, I think?
I heard it was the 20th, but I'll tell you what, I turned this thing in a year ago. So I've been chomping at the bit.
Yeah.
And I was saying, Lynn, you said, I've been telling everybody it's coming out in June. Well, no, that's when we'll put the first single out. And so I am just so happy that people are going to be able to hear our respectful and loving versions of these songs. And you know what? It's interesting because our manager label said the Doobie Brothers song is by far the most commercial song on this record. It's got to be the first song on the CD, and that's the first single. And I went, are you sure? There's a couple of other songs that are in the circle of people that hear it that are saying could be great. He said, no, Doobie Brothers. And, about 3 weeks before he was going to put that out. And of course, now see the music business, I don't understand at all. It's all about Spotify and Amazon and free listens and this and that. It's like, shit, and so he said, no, we did our research and we're going to put out Simple Man by the Leonard Skinner song out as the first single, follow it with the Doobie Brothers song a few weeks before the album comes out. And I went, okay, you're the boss. I did my work. I turned in the best album that we and I could make, and now they're going to pick what it is. Okay.
Well, it's interesting because with Spotify, the audiences pick the singles, because if you put the whole album out, the one with the most downloads or streams, that's going to be the best song, the single or whatever.
Right. And we'll see what happens with that. Yeah. And you know what? And when he picked Simple Man, I went, well, I only see one problem with that, Lynn. And here I was thinking as a 70s and 80s guy. I said, that song's over 6 minutes long. It's not going to get on the radio. And he said, this isn't about radio. This is about Spotify and getting streams and getting this. I went, oh, okay. If 6 minutes and 20 seconds doesn't matter anymore. But you know what? I wanted to keep that song, true to the original, even while adding the accordion player on there, because I really like our down home version. That really sets it like in the back porch kind of thing.
Yeah. Would you play any of these songs live? Because I heard you say something like you have the same set list for the last 25 years. Would you pick it up and add one of these songs in there, or two of them?
We've had the same set list, the same 35 or 45-minute set list for 25 years, because people pay good money to hear about 6 or 7 Firefall songs. And, and if we get a headline and we're playing 2 hours or 90 minutes, we obviously throw other things in, including occasional Beatles songs or something. But yes, we need to play, and are working out at sound checks when we gig now. We are needing to play probably 3 or 4 of these or 5 of these songs, and, I've even been thinking that, playing, telling the crowd the new album, blah, blah, blah. And then as an encore song, playing the Doobie Brothers song and any one of those other songs, people are going to love that because it's a song they all know and love, a new version of those songs. So I'm just still really pleased and happy that, our versions that we cut, being true to that, but not having to stick right to the program, that most everybody that, I talk to, including so many interviewers and bloggers and stuff, say this is a great record. Yay!
Well, yeah. It's great songs, and you guys did them justice. And like I said, some of you changed little things here and there, but I think it all works. I think one of the most interesting songs to me was the last one, the Vegas song, because I'm such a Vegas fan. And I'm like, how have I never heard this song? Now explain the history with that, because I know you played with Graham Parsons. Was that song popular back in the 70s?
No. I played with Graham behind his GP first album on Warner Brothers. When the tour ended and they flew me back to Colorado, he and Emmylou went out to California, got some more songs together, and immediately started his new record, Grievous Angel, which included the song Ooh, Las Vegas. I don't know where the song came from, and not looking, I couldn't tell you who wrote it. But man, I was thinking, God, that's great. And it has that wonderful country pick and fast Telecaster country stuff that I can't play. I couldn't play back when I was in Graham's band, and I can't play now. And when I picked that song as one of the 3 songs that I would sing on that, having played with Graham Parsons and Emmylou Harris, who are known for that song, I knew that I needed to get a really hot country picker to play the country parts of that, or just go to town. And there's a guy in Boulder, Eben Grace, who I asked to play on that song, and he told me, how straight do you want me to play this? And I said, I think you should go nuts. And we just recorded him playing the song like three different times of just going, blah, 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 great country stuff, that we then chopped up and, okay, let's use that lick here and all that kind of stuff. And I played the second lead guitar on that song, but I'm not a country picker, and I wanted to do Graham and Emmylou justice. So have you heard their version?
No, I'll have to go back and listen to the original.
Oh my God.
I love your version. I was like, this is cool. I thought that would be a cool song, because I love Vegas so much. I think it'd be cool to go to Vegas and hear you guys play that live. That would be fun.
Yeah, that'd be fun. So go to Google and type in Graham Parsons, Ooh, Las Vegas, and it'll come up, and you'll be able to hear it off the record.
Yeah, I'll check out some of the other originals too that I wasn't super familiar with, like, but yeah, a lot of these songs I've heard, and
yeah, you young
I've
guy,
heard the bands and stuff. So yeah, it's cool. It's like fun. I think it's fun for bands to do stuff like this, and it's always nice to put out new music. I know that's it's not a huge money maker anymore for bands, but it's still fun for the fans, and it gives you a reason to do podcasts and get people talking about Firefall again.
Right. I think Emmylou, as a solo artist after Graham died, did Las Vegas on one of her albums, so you could look up her version too. Okay. But the sad thing about the Graham Parsons story, as most people know, is when he finished his last vocal on his second solo record, which would be called Grievous Angel, the night after he finished his last vocal, he went out with an ex-girlfriend to Joshua Tree to party and celebrate the album being done, and did too many drugs and drank too much and killed himself.
Yeah, terrible tragedy. Way too young, but he left some great music, that's for sure.
Way too young. And it's funny, I've kind of keep myself out of the argument that, well, Graham Parsons invented country rock. And it's my opinion that it was the Byrds with Sweetheart of the Rodeo, the non-commercial success of Graham taking them in a country direction, and the Buffalo Springfield with Kind Woman and a Pedal Steel, so that it was early Buffalo Springfield and the Byrds on Sweetheart, then Poco, which came out of Buffalo Springfield, Poco and Graham Parsons, but also Rick Nelson from Ozzie and Harriet Show when he was a teen throb. He played country rock, and also Mike Nesmith from the Monkees with what was his band name? The Great American something. They were all inventing in Southern California what would become known as country rock and kind of take over the world. Europe ate country rock up, and anything to do with the Byrds or Graham Parsons or Poco was really big over there. But really, Graham contributed mightily to inventing country rock, but Poco was doing their brand of it too.
Yeah. Well, and you played with a lot of these guys. I think, did you say the only one that you haven't played with that's maybe considered country rock is the Eagles? That's one that's on your bucket list?
Well, it's not on my bucket list, and I'll never play with the Eagles. But
Why not?
oh,
No.
well, they've got they've got plenty. Joe Walsh and and they're doing their last tour now. In fact, well, let me just say that I know Joe Walsh. He did some guitar work for me at his house right around the time that they were making Rocky Mountain Way up at Caribou with Barnstorm. And and I've met Henley, and Rick Roberts used to know those guys a lot, and Randy Meisner was with Rick Roberts. So there's tendrils to the Eagles, but the truth is that when the Eagles got to be huge, which their first album didn't go gold right away, and it took a while for the public to go, wow, I love this stuff. And after Hotel California, then all their albums went quadruple platinum and all that kind of stuff. But we never toured with the Eagles. I think this is just my opinion, because we were in a smaller field, but in the same ballpark as them. They were in the big leagues of country rock, and Firefall was a littler, smaller band down here. But, we'd play with, Little River Band and Dan Fogelberg and Doobie Brothers and everything, but not the Eagles. And, the Eagles are the top of the heap with what they do and who they are and the songs they have. And, interestingly enough, we have some gigs next year in Florida with Don Felder of the Eagles, Firefall, and Jim Messina. It's like, wow, now that's a cool bill.
Yeah, that would be really fun. Wow, that would be a great
I hope
show.
we do more. I hope we do more gigs than just two. But it's interesting, and there are egos and infighting, and in that mesh of musicians. But the main thing is this positive. The music shines through, and when you look at that whole thing of the Eagles, Poco, the Byrds, Stephen Stills, Crosby, Stills and Nash and Young, Loggins and Messina, Kenny Loggins, that whole thing, they played and sang on each other's records. Joni Mitchell dated Graham Nash and was hung around and was a huge part of that Southern California thing. It's I feel really fortunate to have played, and maybe still playing, a small role in that great music of the 1970s.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And people, and you're still making music, and I love it. And I'd love to see you guys live. If you ever come to Arizona, I can take my parents. I think my parents I think that's when I first heard your songs was as a kid. I think my parents played it. So.
Well, it's interesting. I'm in my 70s now, and our audiences are older 50s, 60s, and 70s. Because 80-year-old can't get to concerts anymore, really. It's like 60s and 70s. But night after night, I'll look out in the crowd, and there'll be a couple that are 30 years old or 25 years old, or some kids singing along with our songs like everybody else in the crowd is. And it's because their parents listened to Dan Fogelberg and Firefall and all of that back when they were growing up. So it was a great time for music, and I hope the Friends and Family album reflect that.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for doing this. People can also donate to the suicide, or is there another anti-suicide charity, or is there another charity that you want to promote here at the end?
Well, whatever suicide prevention's about. I just heard about 10 minutes earlier than we started, what's the charity? And I didn't really know what, because I've given my song Call on Me away to anybody who wants to use it out there. It's a positive song about a terrible tragedy going on still in America. So they can look up, if they'd like to donate to a charity, either look locally or look nationally to suicide prevention. And if they take funds, because it costs a lot of money to keep those hotlines working. My song Call on Me was written, the person singing the song is the person that's on the phone trying to talk the kid in crisis on the other end down from the precipice, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for doing this. And people should download the album and donate some money to the charity as well. And thank you so much. And we'll
Friends and family, baby. It's a good one.
All right.
Thank you. Very nice talking to you.
You too. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Thank you for taking the time to listen to the full podcast episode. Please help support our guests by following them on social media and purchasing their products, whether it be a book, album, film, or other thing. And if you have a few extra dollars, please consider donating it to their favorite charity. If you want to support the show, you can like, share, and comment on this episode on social media and YouTube. And if you want to go the extra mile, you can give us a rating or review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or Google Podcasts. Finally, make sure you're subscribed to the show on YouTube for the video versions and other exclusive content. We appreciate your support. Have a great rest of your day and shoot for the moon.